Hey everybody, Wayne here. In today's overview and review, I'm going to take a look at Halls of Hegra, designed by Petter Olsen and published by Tompet Games. Tompet Games did send me this review copy to look at. Halls of Hegra is a solitaire historical strategy game that uses a variety of mechanisms such as worker placement, bag building, and tower defense to simulate the Siege of Hegra. In Halls of Hegra, you act as the Norwegian defenders against the German attackers. The battle for Hegra occurred during World War II as part of the German invasion of Norway in 1940. Let's do a quick overview. I have a complete playthrough video for an in-depth look at the game. I'll cover my pros and cons, and then I'll end with my final thoughts. All right, let's get on to the table. All right, let's do a quick overview of Halls of Hegra. I do have a complete playthrough that has more of an in-depth look at the game, both in the overview section and also obviously the playthrough, where you get to see all the aspects as they work. Okay, so Halls of Hegra, you play as the Norwegian defenders against the German attackers, besiegers, and finally attackers again. The game itself is made up of potentially up to 11 turns. You see the turn track on the bottom of the map here. During each of those turns, it's divided up into multiple stages. A mobilization stage, where you're going to be building up your defenders, you're going to be building up the fortress, you're going to be conducting repairs, getting it ready for the German attack. There will then be a first attack stage, a Siege 1 and Siege 2 stages, and finally at the end of turn 11, if you make it that far, a last stand. During each turn and each of the stages, there's going to be a separate deck of cards, a mobilization deck of cards, first attack deck of cards, etc. You will draw a card from one of those decks, whatever stage you're in. So say it happens to be the start of turn 4, you're in the first attack stage, you'll draw a first attack event card. You're going to resolve what's on the card. The card's going to have a lot of information on it. First off, you're going to check the weather. You're then going to adjust the weather marker here, and if it's snowing, which in this case it would be, you would put it for snow, which would slow down any of your defenders that are out on the supply runs here, which I'll explain in a minute. Also would move this track over, which potentially could cause hits drawing from the hit bag. The snow track here, though, if you have defenders that are shoveling snow, eventually will actually uncover more tiles, which will give you more actions to take. Okay, then you will resolve the event, which will tell you something like, oh, injure a defender, remove one miss from the hit bag, etc. You'll have a little bit of flavor text. We need to increase the walls defending the fortress. And then it's going to tell you down here a couple actions to take. Maybe something like early in the game, it's going to be add a doubt disc to the recruit bag. In this case, this iconography means to take to draw from the recruit bag to attempt to bolster your defenders, and then that is the push your luck aspect. Because you are drawing from the bag, you can draw up to 4 defenders. However, if you draw a purple doubt disc, you actually then have to put everything back in the bag except just 1 defender. Your defenders, by the way, are these discs here out on the board, and then this officer here. You're going to have officer, you're going to have these blue ones are volunteers, these greenish, yellow ones, mustard colored, whatever you want to call it, tan, I guess, would be soldiers, and then the white ones are medics. Depending on which defender, which color, which disc it is, it may or may not be able to do certain actions. It may be able to do 2 of an action, maybe the only one that can take an action, or it may not be able to take an action based on its type. In addition, there are going to be other possibilities down here. There's, for instance, sometimes there's an aircraft silhouette. It's going to tell you to add aircraft stacks of the aircraft markers to the hit bag. It may be artillery, which tells you you're going to conduct artillery strikes on the fortress, which means you're going to be drawing from the hit bag. Or in this case here, it has ×4. Those are the German infantry meeples. These meeples are down here on the bottom left of the board. They're going to enter in these sectors. You're going to be rolling for them with the dice. They're going to be moving. They're going to be possibly hitting your defenders, getting closer and closer to the fortress. Potentially, if they reach this spot, they're going to charge and potentially injure or kill your defenders. Now, the card is the very first part of the game during the event phase. We're drawing an event card and acting on it. That's also when, depending on the stage of the game, you're going to do, like I mentioned, things like drawing from the recruit bag. Eventually, you're not going to have the recruit bag in the latter parts of the game. You'll be done with recruiting your defenders. You're just going to have whatever defender discs you have out there. Once you get through the event phase, you go to the morning phase. That's where those defenders I talked about that you're recruiting, you're going to have them in either the tired, rested, or ready boxes. You're going to be spending supplies and morale to move them to ready, or you also get to move a couple to rest each turn. You're then going to be taking the defenders that are in the ready box and assigning them to action locations. That is the worker placement part of the game, right? And it's things like firing at the Germans, firing artillery, going on supply runs, conducting maintenance, shoveling snow, repairing damaged guns or artillery, increasing the defenses, improving the morale, or sending people to the infirmary. You have injured soldiers will become injured. You're going to want to make sure you have beds open. Once they leave this track, they can go back to your ready or tired boxes over here, and it can be used again. Otherwise, they'll be in the waiting area. If they get to the end or other things happen, they're going to end up in the morgue, which is then going to hurt you over on the morale track. Before I continue with morale, I want to talk about supply runs. When you place defenders in supply runs, they're going to go out here, starting at the Fortress Hegra right here. They're going to enter out on the map. They're going to be dodging German patrols. You can see German artillery out here. For instance, here we have a hunter, this green defender. He is bringing back a supply marker. He went and picked it up here, and he's trying to bring it all the way back to the fortress. When he does that, you're going to get increased to morale. You're going to increase to supply, and then you're going to have whatever special marker, whatever on that marker told you to do. Finally, each turn, there's going to be this morale track here. Depending on certain modifiers, your morale is going to go up or down. You're going to be drawing from the low morale or high morale deck. Low morale cards are going to hurt you. High morale cards are going to help you. At the end of a turn, you check the surrender chart. You're going to want to check for things like how many defenders are in the morgue, so deceased defenders, how many defenders are in the waiting area, how many German artillery on the map, and then if it's in any of the siege stages, how many healthy defenders you have. So if you have a ton in the infirmary like this and you only have a handful that are healthy, odds are that at that point you're going to lose the game automatically. This track here, or this cube, is going to go up and down the track depending on actions you take. Conduct artillery strikes on the airfield. You can move the surrender marker down so you can help yourself. But other actions, like I said, anything on here is potentially going to move it up. If it ever gets that skull and crossbones, you lose automatically. So that's the way to lose. The way to win is you survive all the way to turn 11. You're going to conduct a last stand. A last stand card will be played. There's going to be a massive attack of German infantry on your walls. You're going to conduct another surrender check. If you survive it, congratulations, you win the game. If, more likely, you don't survive it, go ahead, reset, try again. All right, I think that covers at least a broad overview of the game. Like I said before, I have a complete playthrough. Even if you just watch the first overview, maybe the first turn of the game, that'll really give you a good idea of how this game works. I don't want to spend too much more time on it, on the overview part of it. Again, you're drawing cards depending on the stage, flipping it over, resolving effects. You're then potentially adding to or drawing from the recruit bag. You are getting your defenders. You're placing them on action locations. The Germans, may be launching infantry attacks. They may be conducting airstrikes or artillery strikes. You, with your defenders, you want the most defenders you can at the beginning of the game, right, during the recruit stages. You're trying to draw defenders out of the bag, and that's the push your luck aspect, so that you can then conduct more actions, so that you can load the hit bag with misses, so you can maybe get patrols off the map and out of the game into the reserve. You want to have the walls manned with your defenders. You want the artillery ready to fight. You have one artillery you need to repair at the beginning of the game. There's a potential second artillery gun, but it's in this stack of tiles that are covered by snow. So if you are able to shovel snow, you may be able to draw additional artillery. There's other tiles in here, such as adding a map room, adding a radio, adding a medicine cabinet, or you'll find additional supplies. Speaking of supplies, you're going to want to conduct supply runs because you want to send defenders out here to go get more supplies. Because the supplies, remember, you spend them to ready your defenders from tired to ready. Also, if you're ever out of supplies at the end of a turn, it's going to hurt your morale. You're going to want to send your defenders to maybe get rid of German patrols, maybe add more of those miss tokens to the hit bag, or potentially increase morale, or add additional soldiers to your defenders. Overall, you are just at the very beginning trying to build up your forces, trying to build up the fortress. In the middle, you're starting to fight with the Germans. And towards the latter half, you're just trying to survive artillery, trying to survive airstrikes, and trying to keep your men from either ending up in the infirmary or ending up in the morgue. All right, that should do it for my overview. Let's go to my pros and cons. As always, cons first. All right, let's start off by talking about the rule book. I read a comment from someone who said it was indecipherable. I'm happy to report that's not true. However, it's not a great rulebook. The main problem is, while there is a lot of good information in the rulebook, I especially love, by the way, this player aid on the back here, the information that's in the rulebook, especially the sequence of play, it's spread out all over the place. Because the game itself, right, is broken up into multiple stages, and the actions that you have available each turn change based on what stage you're in. Some actions you may take or events you resolve for the Germans happen every turn of the game. Others may only be a turn or two. That is illustrated here on the player aid with the kind of colored in areas. You can see, for example, moving the weather marker. Well, that's every turn. Resolve the event card text. That's every turn. But, adding doubt disc to the recruit bag, that's only going to be during this stage. Add air tiles to the hit bag. Draw tiles from the hit bag. Those are only going to be during the siege stages. This leads to the rulebook trying to explain things in order of the sequence of play, which is event phase, morning phase, day phase. But because what stage of the game the turn you're in changes, you start off by skipping over sections, then have to later go back to check them. There are also some things that could be clearer, especially when it comes to some of the event or morale cards and how they should be resolved, or some of the rules with defenders and how to remove them. It's a game that after playing multiple times, I almost feel confident I know how to play, but because of the rule book, I don't know if I'll ever feel absolutely certain. I'll always have that doubt. Did I play that turn 100% correctly? Now, is it the worst rulebook I've ever seen? Not even close. But there is definite room for improvement, and I hope to see a better rulebook in the next printing. My second issue with the game is while it uses cubes well, and I don't have a problem with them, it doesn't need these meeples. So there's German, artillery, and soldier meeples, right, that are part of the game. They, in my opinion, they're silly to look at, they're silly looking, and they're just a pain to deal with. To me, they add nothing to the game, and they only take away from the seriousness of the history. Now, not everything in a historical game has to be solemn, but these goofy-looking meeples are the definition of superfluous. They're not only silly-looking, they're also kind of a pain to play with. What I mean by that is that you're trying to manipulate these large, oddly shaped wooden pieces on a board that is otherwise kind of cramped for space. The board's already full of cards, tiles, cardboard counters. The artillery, they're supposed to go up there on that track. Well, the track is these little squares, artillery sticking out of the slots. And then down here with the soldiers, they're huge compared to these little sectors they're supposed to be standing in. But not only that, in addition, with the soldier meeples, their physical positioning matters within what area they're in, but also whether they're standing or not. A standing meeple is ready for action, but if a meeple is laying down, it's supposed to be suppressed. Overall, it's really fiddly, and it just doesn't work for me. I would much rather have seen wooden discs like the defender discs. For example, the German soldier discs could be, maybe a little bit larger. They could have German soldier artwork on them, and then they could be flipped over to show when they're suppressed. Or maybe, larger wooden blocks. You already have wooden cubes, or even just cardboard tiles like you do with the airstrike tiles, with the repair tiles, etc. Any of those ideas I think would be easier to manipulate for game functionality and be more visually impactful. The last negative I want to talk about is a recruit bag. Your success, or should I say luck, with a recruit bag and the push your luck aspect of the mechanic will absolutely make or break your game. During those first few turns of the game, in the mobilization stage, you are pushing your luck, attempting to draw defenders. You start off with one, you draw a second. If you're able to draw 3 or 4 a turn, you can go up to 4, and you never draw one of those purple doubt discs, you're going to have a huge force of defenders to take actions with. However, if you're unlucky and you draw a doubt disc, which automatically, whether you've drawn 2, 3, 4 defenders, knocks it down to you get to just keep 1. So if you draw a doubt disc during, say, 2 or more of those early turns, that means you're going to end up gaining only 1 defender each of those turns. So as your entire engine is built on having defenders available to man the walls, to fire artillery, scout for supplies, build defenses, repair damage, man the infirmary, etc., the difference between having, 20 defenders available versus having 10 is like playing a card game where one game you play with a full hand the entire game, the next game you only play with half a hand the entire time. I don't care how well you know the game, how well you know the system, how well you play it, how good you are at the game. If you are playing with that kind of handicap, which is entirely luck-based and there's no way to mitigate it, you are going to lose, and lose poorly. I don't hate the push your luck mechanic, as I've seen push your luck pulled off really well before in historical games. See Herman Luttman's In Magnificent Style as a great example. I just don't like how it's implemented here. Maybe something could have been there where with the doubt discs, instead of automatically drawing down to 1, maybe the doubt disc just ends, or discarding down to 1, right? So maybe you get to keep drawing, and as soon as you draw a doubt disc, that's where you stop. That way, if you draw 3 defenders and you go for 4 and you get a doubt disc, okay, you just stop there. That may not be push your luck, but it sure is a lot more fair. Okay, that's it for the cons. On to the pros. First off, the artillery and soldier meeples aside, the components are excellent. The board, while appearing busy at first, let me grab some of these cards here. The board, while it does look really busy at first, and I was definitely kind of overwhelmed when I first looked at it, it's a strength of the game. It features some beautiful artwork, especially up here when you're outside the fortress, in the supply run area. Yet the action spaces and the play areas are clear and easy to read. Speaking of clear and easy to read, the cards, continue the very nice production value. They're decently high quality cards. They're not quite linen finish, so they're, one step down from that. But I didn't even notice that until basically I was doing my review. I was writing up my review. They look good. The instructions and graphics on them are clear. Everything's easy to follow. And I love the little quotes on here, Hegra Village will fall soon. It's a little bit of history, a little bit of thematic, right? It kind of gets you into the game, into this battle, this part of history. I do think the iconography on the bottom of the cards, specifically when you kind of get to some of the other stages where there's multiple icons. So looking at, here, when you flip a card over and you got it down, you can see it, but maybe this iconography could be a little larger, but that's a minor complaint at worst. All right. Second, the game plays very quickly and smoothly. I've already talked about the rulebook issues, but the game system at its core is really well done. By my second playthrough, I was flipping cards, running through turns very quickly. And due to the turn-by-turn resolution where you flip a card and then you run through and then you complete, right? And now you're, okay, move the cube and you're on to the next turn. Because of that, as a solitaire game, and as long as you can leave it set up, it's a type you can easily walk away from and finish, later in the evening, later at night, or the next day. Third, I love the dice resolution in this game. Although luck can hurt a game, see the recruit bag, in the case of the dice in this one, since you're often rolling so many of them, it actually feels more fair, right? The fate of a turn doesn't come down to a single die roll. Instead, at worst, you're rolling multiple dice, and if you roll all of them poorly, it almost feels like, okay, luck was just against me, and that's almost fair versus rolling one die and saying, oh, it failed, now I'm done. I like the fact that you're kind of rolling, I don't want to call it a handful of dice, but you're rolling multiple dice, usually all the time, every turn. Fourth, the replayability is off the charts. Not only are there all the luck-based aspects I've already talked about, but the amount of cards you draw from means you only draw a fraction of the cards available. An example is the first stage of the game, the Mobilization stage. You draw 1 card a turn, and there are 3 turns. But there are actually 9 Mobilization stage cards. That means you're only going to see a third of them each game. So in your next game, you could see 1, some, or maybe none of the cards you had your previous game. And each of the stage deck of cards is that way. That alone brings a lot of unpredictability and replayability, built into the system, the engine of the game. Then in regards to player agency, you get to decide where you place your defenders, right, in the worker placement aspect. So, you have a ton of player agency. If you decide to branch out and change how you want to play the game in your next try, there are so many different action locations you can place your defenders in each turn that if you want, right, you could never take the same action every turn, or at least very different actions. If you're willing to adjust your strategy from game to game, you can try different ways to survive all the way till that last stand on turn 11. Okay, that's it for my pros and cons. Let's end with my final thoughts. Petter Olsen, the designer of Halls of Hegra, has done a wonderful job in taking a little-known battle and turning it into a very playable and replayable solitaire strategy game. Is it perfect? No, and I don't expect any game to be perfect. But I do know Halls of Hegra has received a lot of praise, and I've heard some people potentially call it their game of the year. Unfortunately for me, with the rulebook as written, the filliness of the meeples, and that game-determining luck of the recruit bag, all together, that means this one won't be in the running for game of the year for me. Yet, flaws aside, the game stayed on my table for 2 weeks, easy. Which, with as many games as my table usually sees, that says something. Why did it keep coming back? Because I really enjoy the entire package, the entire experience. The visual presentation of the game is wonderful, and the gameplay is just smooth and satisfying. Does it deserve a second printing? Without a doubt. How about a second edition with some changes to the rulebook and maybe some of the components and the rules regarding the recruit bag? I can only hope. As is, though, congratulations to Petter Olsen for creating a solid game that shines light on a little-known battle from a very well-known conflict. Alright, thank you to everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video review. Please let me know what you think of my video and this game in the comments below. And until next time, everybody, later.